Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. So here's the thing about April, the release schedule is pretty empty. Now, this is good for players looking to catch up on their card pool so they can get to the current level of the meta, but for me, well, I'm at a loss. I could go back and cover some older archetypes, but I like them to have a little relevance when the video comes out, so instead we're going to make a quick swerve and talk about Rush for a little bit, the latest form of official Yu-Gi-Oh! It's got a better card frame, a way different pace, but still has a lot of familiar elements from the old game. Now, granted, it does seem like the TCG branch of distribution is determined to make sure we don't get our hands on this game, which means unless you've kept your ear to the streets or have played some Duel Links recently, you may not know anything about the game, save for the fact that everything plays like Fluandereeze. So before I start delving into all the different kinds of cards that Rush offers, I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page, so I made this video talking about the rules of Rush Duel. From a fellow Yu-Gi-Oh player's perspective. If you don't know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh, prepare to make some leaps of logic going forward. So strap in, because we're about to turbocharge the game with Rush Duels Explained. Today's episode is possible thanks to viewers like you, as well as my patrons. If you like what I do here, I would super appreciate it if you'd subscribe to help us reach another wonderful milestone video. And if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome benefits, check out the link to my Patreon in the description below. So what's the deal with Rush Duels? Well, it may be easier to go over what it has in common with standard Yu-Gi-Oh first. Monsters, spells, and traps are still part of the game, so you don't have to worry about some newfangled card types. That being said, there is less to keep track of, as a number of different card subtypes have been cut from the game. Spell cards now only consist of normal, ritual, equip, and field, so there's no more quick play or continuous ones. And when it comes to trap cards, there are only normal ones, which means no continuous or counter traps. And while we're on the subject of trap cards, it's also worth noting that Rush does not do chains like the normal game. In fact, it doesn't do them at all. Trap cards seem to be the most common, and almost exclusively, way to do quick effects in this game. And when you can activate a trap card, you only get the chance to activate one of them, so no chaining together two or more cards in a sequence. You'll also notice some familiar statistics here, but everything's been shuffled around a bit on the card itself, so let's go through the anatomy of it just to make sure we know where everything is found. First up, the name. It does everything those normally do and is in a similar spot. Though from my understanding, Rush Duels has largely done away with the idea of archetypes, so the name isn't quite as important for identifying what support it works with. Next up we have the attribute, right up here in the top right like it always is. Next is the card art, which has been given a lot more real estate to work with, and I love it. Next, you'll see the level, probably the biggest improvement of the card frame so far. Instead of having to count out each individual star like with the original frame, it just shows you the number of the level. Short, sweet, and to the point. Otherwise though, levels function as normal. 5s and 6s need 1 tribute, 7 and up need 2, and unlike in core Yu-Gi-Oh, having a high level is not automatically a red flag. Tribute monsters are a very important part of how the game plays out. Right next to it are the attack and defense values, also increased in size and moved up, a really good choice. Below that we have the type line, same stuff applies here, and below is the effect. The formatting looks radically different than the core Yu-Gi-Oh ones, and that's because the problem-solving card text of Rush is extremely streamlined, doing away with the need for hunting down colons and semicolons. Now, the text is broken up into the requirement, which will be the conditions you have to meet and or the costs you have to pay to activate the effect, and the effect itself, each signposted with big bold letters and brackets. The clarity on display here is unbelievable. You'll never want to go back to how older cards are formatted again. It might also be wild to see that none of these cards have a once per turn condition on them, but fret not, for activated effects, that's going to be implied. When it comes to spell cards, it'll list off what kind of spell it is in the type line like with monsters, but aside from that, you've basically seen everything the Rush frame has to offer. It's pretty snazzy. So now that we have an understanding about the cards, let's move on to actual gameplay. Deck composition is basically the same as usual. A 40 to 60 card main deck, a 0 to 15 card extra deck, and a 0 to 15 card side deck, and you can only run up to 3 copies of any given card, other rules notwithstanding. Next, the field. You'll notice that the outer 2 columns have been shaved off, leaving only 3 monster zones, 3 spell and trap zones, and no extra monster zones. If you've played any amount of speed duels or Duel Links, this will be a familiar setup. Next, we have the phase order. Rush Duel goes from draw phase, to main phase, to battle phase, to end phase. This means we have no standby phase to check for beginning of turn effects, and no main phase 2 for setting up plays after you've rushed into your opponent during battle. So if you have any trap cards or other things you want to set on your field, you'll need to do it before you declare your first attack. Probably one of the biggest things to unlearn from your time playing the base game. Next, let's break down those phases. Draw is probably the second most infamous thing about this format. During it, you draw cards until you have 5 in your hand, unless you already have 5 or more cards in your hand, in which case you just draw 1 to help keep the game going. So if you empty your hand out during your last turn, you're drawing a fresh 5 cards, a feature that most decks are pretty much built around in this game. You want as many live cards as possible so you can keep drawing into new ones, and if you have spell cards that aren't immediately relevant, you can set them in the back row to free up a draw. It also makes tribute monsters relevant because by tributing 2 monsters, you've made more room in your monster zones to normal summon more monsters, which, spoilers, you can do as much as you want during your turn. So aim to have a good balance of level 4 and lower monsters to throw out as filler, tribute monsters to clear room while providing stronger stats and effects, and back row cards. This also means the value of draw effects are greatly lowered, because any that you draw that you can't immediately use counts against your ability to draw next turn. It's kinda wild. Next up, the main phase. Like we said a bit ago, you have an unlimited amount of normal summons in this phase, so send out all your little critters to your heart's content. Aside from that, there really isn't much of a difference between this and the core game. You can change the battle position of your monsters once per turn if they weren't summoned that turn, you can set trap cards so they'll be ready to use on the following turn. Basically, you use this time to set up your plays and get ready to go to the battle phase. Like core Yu-Gi-Oh!, each player has 8,000 life points, and battle is conducted the same as usual. You punch monsters to deal damage to close out the game, attacking directly if your opponent has no monsters to defend themselves with. The end phase is also a place for end of turn effects to play out, and that covers the turn order. You swap back and forth between the 2 players until one of you runs out of life points. That covers what I feel are the biggest overlaps between Rush and the original game. Now, let's go over a few mechanics that are unique to Rush. On some cards, you'll notice a golden legend emblem at the top left of the card art, which denotes them as a legend card. Now, when Rush first started, you were only allowed to play a single legend card in your deck. But nowadays, you can run up to 1 legend card from among monsters, spells, and traps. So you could run a total of 3 of them if you have 1 of each. These are usually in place to keep powerful cards in check, which kinda makes sense because at present, each one is an important card from the core game. That's right, familiar faces like Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician, and Pot of Greed are in this game. And since the power level of your average Rush card is lower than your average core card, it kinda makes sense they wouldn't want you running around with 3 copies of the legendary Engine of Destruction. And you'll want to keep an eye out. There are also a number of import cards from the core game that are not treated as legend, so you'll get a splash of the original game in Rush. Next up, we have fusion monsters. These are pretty much the same as how they function in the original game, but it turns out polymerization is one of the legend cards. If you want an all-purpose fusion spell, you'll need fusion. Like, that's it, that's just the name of the card. The big difference here is that that only fuses from your material on the field. So if it's too clogged up and you can't get the right fusion material onto the board, you better have a plan B. Now, this next one is a bit of a curveball here. Ritual monsters. These were pretty recently added to Rush, and unlike the core game where they live in the main deck, here you ritual summon from your extra deck. That's right, no more clogged hands full of blue frames you can't summon, now you just need the ritual spell and the material monsters. Another notable thing is that you don't tribute the monsters for ritual summons anymore, you just send them to the graveyard. But aside from that and the extra deck thing, they work pretty much the same. They even codified the fact that you can't spend more levels than is necessary to perform a ritual summon, so that's pretty neat. The last big mix-up I wanted to talk about today is probably my favorite thing about Rush Duels. Most things are an expression of the original game made to fit the format of Rush Duels, but these next cards are truly in a league of their own, and I hope beyond hope that we get to see some version of them in the core game one day. I'm talking about maximum monsters. Here's how they work. A full maximum monster is made up of 3 specific component monsters. These are the center monster, as well as 2 others that share the same name as it, but with L or R to denote where they go in relation to the center piece. You'll also notice that the center maximum monster has a maximum attack stat, and that'll come into play in just a bit. See, the individual monsters can be played as their own, but usually don't gain their effects and are much weaker. You'll need to bring them out in their full glory to access their power. But how does one do this? Simple. All you have to do is gather all 3 pieces in your hand, then declare you're doing a maximum summon. This is a special summon and has you summoning all 3 cards onto the field at once as one enormous monster, taking up all 3 zones. If you already had any monsters on the field, you will have to send them to the grave as part of this summon. And despite being made of 3 monster cards, it is still treated as one monster for the purposes of tributes. When it hits the field this way, it takes on the type, attribute, and name of the center card, and uses the maximum attack stat in lieu of the attack value. Maximum monsters don't have a defense value, and that's because, like with Link monsters, maximums can't be moved to defense position. Another notable aspect about them is that the combined monster has an effect for each of the 3 cards that compose it. Normally, monsters in Rush only have a single effect, but maximums are able to activate each of their individual effects once per turn, giving them up to 3 activations, which is one of the things that makes maximum monsters so unique. So all of that sounds pretty incredible, but what's the catch? Well, it does run counter to the idea of drawing up to 5 at the end of your turn. See, if you have 1 or even 2 maximum monsters in your hand, but you don't have the 3rd able to deploy them, you have to choose between holding onto them and hoping you'll be able to get the final piece out of your diminished draws, or summon those weak individual monsters out now to hopefully get some value out of your draws, and maybe you can use them as tribute fodder for a different monster. It's just enough of a risk versus reward system, and I love the execution. It truly feels like an awe-inspiring creature when you play it, and the fact that we get 3 interconnected panels of art to really express how ginormous these creatures are really sells the experience. And that basically covers everything you need to know to get started with Rush Duels. The only question is, where can you play it? Well, if you want an auto sim, Duel Links is around and has a Rush Duel mode. There's also a Switch game for it, but it only covers the anime up till the end of the 1st season of Rush, so the card pool is way outdated, so I don't really recommend it unless you really need that fix. The last place I can think of to play would be on Dueling Book. They do have a pool specifically for playing Rush Duels in. I also guess you could just proxy the cards and play them with your friends IRL, that's also an option. Sadly, there isn't anything in paper that's really official right now, so it's really up to the fans and the TCG to keep the flame burning, because we don't have any physical support to work from. But hey, eventually they've got to cave at some point, right? They can't keep leaving money on the table forever, and when it does come across the pond, I'll do my best to keep you informed on the options that we have. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, because I've got a couple of wild Rush Explained videos planned for the next couple of weeks, and be sure to share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales that even come with their own lore, and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. It was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders, Upstairs Media, and Sir Knight JCB, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, 50 Gigabytes, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Battle Axe, Kane Senpai, Charlie Mercury, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hair Bear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Garp, Marion James Ipicata, Mike Cook, Millennia Asta, Muse Clark, Neon Yami Nair, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Pat Boos, Rank 10 Trains, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sonic 21 Blast, The Critic of Innocence, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Ally Vatnia, Animasta, Anthrak, A Random Pup, Baden Von Titty Sprinkles, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Chaz Ghost, Chibi Gohan, again, Christopher Fuss, again, Chris B, Cool Trainer Dark, Dante Lawson, Dr. Entity RIP, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Herbal D, Kale the Dragon, Lobomaru 02, Manga Pages, Martin Moore 2468, Natiel Lee Alexander, Nitromo, Not Al Gore, Nyx, Obsidian, Pombo, Rhyme Kairos, Shwenny, Shizuki Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Sphilia, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Queen of Time, The Gene, Tiger X2476, Tristan O'Meara, Zeldrucka and Zero De Nova, as well as the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see another video about a crazy alternate Yu-Gi-Oh format, check out this video where I play some of the coolest multiplayer Yu-Gi-Oh around, domain format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.